In the middle of it all, on a tiny golden throne, sat the queen of the fairies. "I want you to bake me a cake," she said. Well, the baker woman knew that she could not make them a cake, for if they tasted how good her cakes were, they would want to keep her there for always, and she would never see her husband or her baby again. But if you remember, I told you she was quite clever. So she took a moment to compose herself, and then she thought of a plan. "I will make you a cake," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "First I will need a bowl and some flour." "Flour? We don't have any flour here." But as for a bowl, the queen reached behind her throne, and she pulled out a tiny golden bowl, no bigger than a thimble. "Queen, I cannot bake a cake with a bowl that cannot even hold an egg. No, 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 this will never do."
That's what they did. Paul went down to Kansas City, and he brought Babe with him. And Paul, being a big guy, just put his fingers underneath the road and picked it up. And then he attached it to Babe's harness, and he said, "Okay, Babe, do your thing." Babe looked at Paul and just raised one ox eyebrow and shook his big head. But, you know, he tried, he pulled, and nothing really happened. But Paul had a lot of faith in Babe, and so he said, "No, Babe, come on now, you can do this." And it sounds like my mom at softball. Babe, gosh darn, he really put his back into it, and wouldn't you know that he actually got it to budge. Well, then he really gave it his all, and he got going at a pretty good clip. And as he was pulling this road, he actually was able to go a lot further because of all that slack. He actually made it clear down to Mexico, where, after all that hard work, he and Paul had a nice vacation, an all-inclusive. They were able to swim up to the pool bar and have a margarita. Very relaxing. No one else could be in the pool that week because they're awfully big. But it was a great vacation nonetheless. A little bit of a sunburn, of course, on Babe. He turns purple.
But he also made sure he had 2 round, smooth stones that he liked to call his warming stones, because he would put them in the fire until they got nice and hot, and then he would wrap them in little bits of cloth so he could warm his paws on a cold night. Or he would drop them into his little pot so that the water would boil just a little bit faster. Well, one day, he happened to be walking through a very large forest, and he had happened to have run out of food just the other day, so he was really hungry. And he looked up, and it's getting kind of dark. So when he met up with a snake, he asked, "Could you spare a little bit of food and maybe a place to stay for the night?" And the snake said, "Place to stay? Sorry, my home is too small for you. And supper? Just enough for myself."
But in one particular jungle, the Jaguar was king. Or in this case, queen. And every day the Jaguar made sure she did one thing. There was a path, you see, that ran down the middle of the jungle. And every day she would stroll down that path and survey her domain. She would look to the left and to the right. She would look below her. She would also look up, because you can never really trust monkeys or birds. But so feared was this Jaguar, because she had hunted all the animals before, that none of them dared be near the path when she went down it. And so she was always alone. And you can imagine her surprise then one day when she was walking along and she heard a voice cry, "Ah!" Well, she looked to the left, she looked to the right, she looked down, she looked up, because monkeys. But there was nothing there, so she got ready to go on, when again she heard, "Ah!" And there under her paw was a, well, now slightly crumpled cricket. And after it had straightened out its antenna and got his wings straight, the cricket looked at that jaguar and said, "You stepped on me!"
Counter marching across the field, and they're singing, but you have to listen with your littlest, newest ears, because corn fairies sing soft songs, songs that go, "Pla zizzy zizzy, pla zizzy zizzy," and it's softer than an eye wink, softer than a Nebraska baby's thumb. Now, you probably have some questions. You're probably wondering how to tell corn fairies if you see them. If you meet a corn fairy, how will you know? Well, you're in luck because I'm a librarian and I've done some research, so I have the answers for you. You see, all corn fairies wear overalls. They all do. And they wear overalls because they're proud, and they're proud because they work hard, and they work hard because they wear overalls.
King, he said, you are a most merciful king. Can you not find it in your heart to grant me mercy? Yes, I am rather a merciful king, am I not? Very well. I shall grant you mercy. Perhaps. We'll make a little game of it, shall we? I'll ask you 3 questions, and I'll give you 3 weeks to come back and give me an answer. And if you can answer those questions to my satisfaction, I'll give you your mercy. And if not, execution time. Ask your Majesty. Do I get to know the questions ahead of time? Indeed you do.
And he got to her cabin, and he happened to find a chink in the logs, real close to the chimney, where he could peek in and he could spy on that old woman. So he was looking in there at her, and of course she's just rocking back and forth in her chair, carding her wool. Scratch, 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 scratch. And in a minute, well, that's one that's come, 2 more come, and I'm going to get my butcher knife. And she looked right at her fish on the wall. She said this. But the robber, he didn't know that. He said, "Oh, Lowes, she saw me." And he ran back down to his robber friends in the holler. And he said, "She's a witch. She's a witch, I tell you. She saw me right through the wall." She said, "That's one that's come, 2 more come. I'm going to get my butcher knife."
Now, her mother was always telling her she had her head in the clouds, and she thought it was about time that she listened to her mother. So she climbed right up to the top of that beanstalk and looked all around the cloud kingdom. And suddenly, her stomach rumbled really loudly. She had missed supper, and it was just about breakfast time, and she was hungry. So she knocked on the first door she saw. A woman answered the door, asked what she was doing, and tried to get her to go away. But Jacqueline, well, she was persistent. "Are those pancakes I smell? I'm hungry." And she slid right in past the giant's wife. The giant's wife followed her in, and she said, "Really, you should be going. You see, my husband, well, he's a giant, and he has an affinity for human children. And, okay, we'll just eat really quickly, but then you really should be going." So Jacqueline sat at the table, and she enjoyed her breakfast. And just as she was finishing, the house began to shake. There was no time for her to get to the door, so the giant's wife opened up the oven, and Jacqueline popped in. Just as the door closed, she heard, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell a girl who doesn't belong. Be she thin or be she fat, I'll eat her up. And that is that." And the giant's wife said, "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't think you'd notice my new perfume." She had this new ritual Friday afternoons. As she slaved over this kugel, she would chant something, essentially, that I have referred to for a long time as Mrs. F's lament. And it goes something like this. 6 days a week I break my back like a slave in Egypt. And on the 7th day, what do I want? A little nakis, a little pleasure just like anybody else. And what do I get? I get to wash the kugel pot with the salt water of my tears. And then she would go in for a stab, ostensibly be checking for tenderness, but really, I think, working out all sorts of levels of frustration. So on this particular day, she had just uttered, "Salt water of my tears," and she's going for the stab, but before she gets there, that kugel jumps out of the pot and proceeds to run around the kitchen. So Mrs. F, she was taken aback, but she's a pretty hardy woman, and she grabs a broom and she chases that kugel, and she can hear it taunting her, saying things like, "Oh, are you a Hercules?" Well, Mrs. F was many things. She was not a Hercules, and she soon wound up on the floor panting, saying things like, "Surely the Messiah has come. Soon a horse will be president, men will walk on their hands, and I will be murdered by a kugel in my kitchen."
Now, the sun and the wind, they ate with gusto. They finished everything that was set in front of them. But the moon took a little portion, a little morsel from every dish, and tucked it up under her long crescent fingernails. Well, their friends arrived, they ordered more food, they ate and they drank and they danced and they laughed. But eventually the evening came to an end, and they made their way back across the universe home, where they found their mother waiting up for them.
And the lion said, "Meow." He was sort of surprised by that too, because usually lions say roar, and he knew this, so he came a little closer to the lion. And the lion said, "Meow," and held up his paw. And Andy looked closely at the lion's paw, and he could see that there was a thorn stuck in that paw deep in just such a way that the lion wasn't able to get that thorn out of his paw himself. And so Andy thought, okay, see what he could do. So he walked up to the lion really slowly, and the lion let him, so it seemed to be okay. And he reached and he pulled the thorn out of the lion's paw. And then the lion did something really surprising. The lion broke into song. The lion said, "Hey, you, I can't believe it. I am so grateful today. You saved my life, I mean it. How can I ever repay you?"